related to the propaganda surrounding the death of bin Laden, the supposed death of bin Laden. The New York Times sends it directly to the CIA before it's even published in the newspaper. And when this came out a couple of days ago now, the New York Times are asked why it happened, why they did it. And they responded, quote, "I can't go into detail, but I'm confident," this is one of the New York Times editors, "I'm confident after talking to Mark that it's much ado about nothing." Continuing from the article, "Readers will have a hard time believing this explanation. There was clearly a dialogue between Mazzetti and the CIA concerning the article. His request for correspondence to be deleted after reading clearly indicates that he knew full well who he was sending the article to and that he could be landed in trouble if anyone discovered what he was doing. It is blatantly clear that the CIA was leaning on Mazzetti, pressing him for information on what the Times was going to report, and that Mazzetti provided it. The fact that the CIA read Dowd's column before her own editors did has severe consequences as far as freedom of the press goes and should set alarm bells ringing." So the New York Times is pulling the old, move along nothing to see here argument, except for the fact that there's a hell of a lot to see here. Because as this article documents, this is just the latest expression of the New York Times cozy relationship with the Central Intelligence Agency that started long before the weapons of mass destruction scandal, of course, way back in the 50s with Operation Mockingbird. From the article, the Times was the vital cog in the CIA's Operation Mockingbird, a secret campaign conceived in the 1950s to influence media output. Many believe, with some justification, as we have seen, that Mockingbird continues to this day. In a groundbreaking expose entitled "The CIA and the Media," penned in 1977 for Rolling Stone, Carl Bernstein wrote, "The New York Times, the agency's relationship with the Times was by far its most valuable amongst newspapers, according to CIA officials. It was General Times policy to provide assistance to the CIA whenever possible." And so that's been in place since the 50s. Bringing it up to date, of course, it was the New York Times earlier this week that changed the language of its article very subtly, but also very intentionally, to cover up for the fact that it initially reported the CIA was responsible for providing weapons directly to Syrian rebels. They actually admitted it in a New York Times article. As soon as the editor got hold of it, 15 minutes later, the passage was changed to say that the weapons were being provided by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Gulf states. So we got the New York Times covering up for the CIA in that instance just this week. And on the wider topic of controlled state media, it was the New York Times, along with other news outlets, who actually agreed to the conditions laid down by the White House that they could only use certain quotes made by Obama if the White House gave them permission. So it goes back to what I was saying before. People laugh at state-controlled media as being not credible, whether it be in Iran with Press TV, Russia Today, or Syria with Adunia, as we saw in the previous story. But how are they any worse than the New York Times? In fact, the New York Times is about 100 times worse. Knowingly manufacturing lies about yellow cake from Niger to grease the skids for war in Iraq. Over 1 million dead because of that lie helping the war. Sitting on the warrantless wiretapping story for a year on orders of the Bush White House back in 2004, and now covering up for the fact that the CIA is directly arming Syrian rebels. So a New York Times reporter sending advance copies of articles directly to the CIA for approval, for vetting, merely for a heads up, who knows? But what we do know is that the New York Times is in bed with the White House, it's in bed with the CIA, and that's the ultimate confirmation of the fact that just like Russia, just like Iran, just like Syria, we have state-controlled media in the United States. Video shows cop kicking defenseless man in the throat. A new police brutality video shows a St. Paul officer kicking a defenseless man in the throat. Let's go to the clip.
You see that? You see that? Did you see that? He kicked him in the chest.
Kicked him in his chest.
Oh my God! That's how we operate. Oh my God!
Just asked him to put his hands behind his back.
That don't mean he gotta kick me on the ground.
Hey, you lying, man? I ain't even been around here. You lying.
I'm about to tell you, he better tase you, man. Oh my God.
Bro, I got it all, G. I got the whole.
You gotta be taping this. Oh my God! Oh my God!
So it's 30-year-old Eric Hightower is the man you see being kicked in the throat, and the cop responsible for the assault is Jesse Zilge, and Zilge has been placed on administrative leave by the police department while the incident's being investigated. So basically, Hightower was arrested for terroristic threats, they said, damaging property, but crucially, he's not being charged, so it appears as if he was innocent, as he proclaimed in the video. So the epidemic of police brutality sweeping America continues, but what's interesting to me is the fact that whereas these kind of incidents, 10, 20 years ago were more reserved or being meted out against black people, now everyone's a target, as we're going to see with the next story. But what's got us to this stage, I think, is this kind of racist attitude that if this kind of brutality is only being visited on people of, black people, then who cares? It's just a black guy in a poor neighborhood getting beat up by cops. And that's still the attitude amongst a lot of people. In fact, there was a bizarre comment on the INFOWARS story today, which said something like, oh, look, he's obese. He's potentially violent. He's a Negro. Those are the exact quotes. Like the fact that he's overweight, pissed off because he's been kicked in the face, and black, those three reasons mean it's perfectly okay to kick him in the face. It's fine. The guy's laying prostrate on the ground, but apparently if he's fat, a bit angry and black, then that makes everything fine. You just kick him in the face all you want. And so while black people have been targeted for decades, the crime of walking while black or the crime of driving while black, middle-class America has kind of looked the other way, thinking that the same treatment's never going to be visited upon them. And it's like the same cop-out when people said, oh, I don't care about the TSA groping people or radiation body scanners at the airports. I'm just not going to fly. Now the TSA's at political events, they're at prom nights, they're on the highways, and the attitude is, oh, I'm just not going to leave my house. So when you have the attitude of just not caring about tyranny or brutality because it's inflicted upon a race or an economic class of people that you don't identify with, then that tyranny only gets stronger, and soon it's going to be knocking at your door. It's like the famous Martin Niemöller poem. First they came for the communist, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist, and eventually they're going to come for you. So if you don't care about black guys being booted in the throat, then how about this next one? Shock surveillance video shows LAPD officers body slamming defenseless woman, again defenseless like the guy before, into the pavement during violent arrest. This is out of the Blaze. The startling video that is making the rounds shows two Los Angeles Police Department officers snatching a female driver and violently slamming her body into the ground, twice. The woman's alleged offense? Talking on a cell phone while driving and subsequently resisting arrest. As a result of the trauma, Michelle Jordan, 34, sustained intensive bruising and other related blemishes and injuries. So let's see the clip.
Husband told NBC4 his wife was swearing at the officers, but both he and Branch say what happened next was excessive use of force.
And knocked her down to the ground, shoved her arms up behind her back and handcuffed her.
When the swearing continued, she was thrown to the ground a second time while handcuffed. Jordan's attorney, Sy Nazif, says these photos show the scratches and bruises she suffered. The LAPD says an internal affairs investigation is underway, and Police Chief Charlie Beck has seen the videotape.
So this is a mother and a nurse who was pulled over for the egregious crime of talking on her cell phone while driving. And suffice to say, as you saw in the video, the incident didn't turn out too well for her. And you can see all the bruises that she received in the article, which is on the Blaze. So they slam her to the ground twice. These tough guy cops who apparently like to hurt women. for the sin of talking on a cell phone. And basically, again, just treat her like complete crap, treat her like an animal, just because they can, just because they've got a badge and a uniform. Quote, if a civilian were to assault a woman in this manner, he would go to jail, said the woman's lawyer. These officers must be held to the same standard. They have to be accountable. So as I said before, it's an epidemic, and it's being meted out against men, women, black, white, you name it. It's everybody. It's no longer restricted to poor people and black people in poor neighborhoods. It's spreading like a cancer, like a disease. And so, I mean, we saw the story just a couple of weeks ago, the 21-year-old guy, you know, double locked in handcuffs, backseat of a police car, having already been searched by the police. And they claim he shot himself in the head while he was double locked, handcuffed in the back of a police cruiser. Again, an obvious murder cover-up, but because it's a young black guy who's accused of smoking marijuana, nobody seems to care. But when it gets visited upon everybody else, only then people seem to care about it. So, you know, while police are trained that the public is their enemy, and that they're there to be fed upon for revenue generation and pain compliance, the epidemic is only going to escalate. But, you know, now that everybody's armed with a cell phone camera, these cops are starting to realize that they can't treat people like animals without making themselves famous on YouTube, which is now happening basically on a day-to-day basis. So these two stories are just from today. I mean, we could do stories, articles about police brutality every day. That's all we could write about if we really wanted to, because they're constant. The stories are constantly coming out every day. But that's just two from today that are up there on INFOWARS.com. And again, police treating American citizens like animals, like they've got no rights whatsoever. You combine that with the case of Brandon Rowe being abducted from his home, no charges whatsoever, no reason for his arrest, and we're entering a very dangerous situation where the police state is right in our faces. Quote of the day now, this is a Spanish proverb. Law is like a spider's web. Catch the fly and let the hawk go free. Which is precisely what we've seen, of course, with the recent economic collapse. And it's endemic in society and, you know, in general, as we've seen with the recent cases of police brutality. Coming up after the break on InfoWars Nightly News, we're going to have a Planet InfoWars update from Christy Hightower. Exciting new news about the social media network that thousands of people are joining. And also Aaron Dykes' interview with Michael Murphy coming up after the break. Stay tuned.
Welcome, Planet InfoWars Patriots. I'm Christy Hightower, reporting for PlanetInfoWars.com. Just a little update on what's going on the site. I just want to bring to your attention, Alex always says, you know, Planet InfoWars is for people like you to go and find fellow patriots who are passionate, who, you know, want to go camping, others that, you know, dating and all kinds of good stuff like that. Well, he's also said that articles are looked at, and if they're well-written, well-cited, timely, all of the above, that we will put them on the featured stories on InfoWars.com. Well, this week has been no exception. In fact, there's an article called The Conspiracy of an Empire, a letter to those that serve the system, by InfoWars, Planet InfoWars user Sean Helton. And within hours of us finding it, we put it on InfoWars.com, main featured stories. So I just want to remind you that we are looking, we are paying attention, so keep those awesome articles coming. Thank you, Sean, and your partner Nemo for writing that for us.